Good morning and welcome to the highly anticipated Fireside Chat with 8-time Grammy Award-winning trumpeter and musical composer Terence Blanchard. I am Jay Zambrano, Vice President of Advancement and University Relations here at UHD, and it is my distinct honor to introduce today's guests and set the stage for our Fireside Chat. For each installment of our President's Lecture Series, we aim to bring thought-provoking content from informed guests whose work sparks both conversation and inquiry. The trajectory of Terence Blanchard's career is a conversation piece in and of itself, and the intensity of his music is a catalyst for inquiry. Not only is he one of jazz's most esteemed trumpeters, but he has crossed barriers in cinema and opera, which we will hear more about today. Having served as the Kenny Burrell Chair in Jazz Studies at the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the Artistic Director of the Berklee College of Music, the Henry Mancini Institute at the University of Miami, and the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz, Terence Blanchard is no stranger to higher education. In today's conversation, two cousins, Terence Blanchard and our esteemed president, Dr. Lauren Blanchard, both committed to empowering and investing in others, will offer insight into Blanchard family dynamics, their mutual love for music, and their shared commitment to having a positive impact on the future of our country and world. We will also gain insight into Terence Blanchard's creative process, interactions, and musical legends, and what it means to be a trailblazer in musical performance and composition. Our moderator for today's discussion is Ernest Walker, the general manager of Houston's KTSU 90.9 FM and the president of Walker Entertainment Group. With over 30 years of experience in the music and entertainment industries, Mr. Walker uses his leverage to launch community initiatives and to create hands-on opportunities for up-and-coming multimedia professionals. Whether working with high-profile artists and fostering the development of new talent, Mr. Walker is known for his innovative leadership, dedication to mentorship, and expertise in artist management, event production, and brand marketing. Let's give our guests a hand. As our esteemed president, Dr. Blanchard needs no introduction. Therefore, I now turn the mic over to Ernest Walker.
Thank you very much. How y'all doing? Y'all doing all right? Good. Well, it's good to be here, and I'm excited to be on this platform with the Blanchards, right? Actually, I think we'll just kind of dive straight into the conversation. But before we get started, it's really a small world to be on the same stage with you at this time. The last time we were together was, I think it was the tribute to Quincy Jones in Las Vegas. And then full circle, we're here today. So honored to see you again, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. Quincy was a friend and a mentor, man, and a hero. You'd be greatly missed.
Absolutely. I think I'm gonna dive into this first question, and the question is actually for both of you all. And it says, I understand that you are second cousins, and tell us a little bit about your family tree, your relationships growing up, and the musicality that is clearly in the Blanchard family DNA.
I thought this was a family thing.
Not this one.
You want to start? You want to?
Yeah, I'll start. So my grandfather, first of all, I grew up in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and Terence grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. And there was some intersection, but it was minimal as we were younger, meaning that I certainly spent quite a bit of time with his mom and dad when they would come to Lake Charles for different family reunions that we would have. But Terence was never there. And so when we'd ask his mom and dad, well, where's Terence? And they would say something along the lines of, well, he's at home cultivating his skill. But proudly, they would share all the things that he was doing in the music world during that time frame. And so both his father and mother, just exceptional people. I think now about the fact that in terms of the lineage that you're speaking of. So first of all, his grandfather, Terence's grandfather, whose name was Caliste, and my grandfather, whose name was Francois, but we called him Frank, were brothers. And so the reality is that that's how we are cousins. But when I grew up, my grandmother and grandfather actually lived right next door to us. But interestingly, I never met my grandmother because the year that I was born was the year that she passed away. Actually, we were born in the same year. We're both 62 years old. I'm telling your business.
Yes. Even though one of us looks 62.
Y'all look young.
The gray hair, the gray hair. But the interesting part about it is that, from what I know of my grandfather, I did get a chance to meet him. He died probably when I was about 6 or 7 years old, but he was loud and cantankerous. And, he smoked a lot. I'll even say he probably even drank a lot. But, the reality is that he just loved family. And what you don't know is that many times it was a huge house that he lived in. I remember this so well. And you would always hear music coming from the house. Now, he was in a wheelchair. He was a diabetic, and so he had one leg amputated. And I remember that well. During that time, they didn't have like a prosthetic leg. And so, but he would find a way to lean up against the wall, and he would open his house to anybody who would want to come because he would want people to dance. And so the first floor was like a dance hall. And I remember that so well. And I was like, who are all those people in there dancing, right? And it would be all kinds of music that he would play. But, it dawned on me the other day as I was thinking about this that, it really does speak to how important music really was to our family. My father actually played the saxophone. He played with this group called the Cupcakes. I don't think you knew that either. My father ended up with heart disease, and they recommended to him, because of all of the energy that he would exert in playing the horn, that he should stop playing with the Cupcakes. And that was the hardest thing in the world for him and for us, because we saw how much he loved it. Music just has been a part of the fabric of us. We've got and I don't know how much you know about this either, and I'm going to hand it over to you in just a minute, but that we've got a cousin who is a master violinist, Monica Davis, and her relative will be here shortly. But anyway, she lives in New York, and she's just really fantastic. You might know the name of the person, but we also have a drummer.
Yeah, he lives here in Texas, someplace. Right. Oh man, JJ.
JJ, mm-hmm. You know which group he played for?
He did play with Derek Trucks for a little bit, and he played with a bunch of different people. So he's always on the road.
So frankly, what I imagined this to be honest, was that I was going to bring all these cousins, all the musical cousins together in one place at one time, not only to meet one another. And of course, Terence didn't know this, but I was like, hey, we can put a concert together. We have all the instruments there. We have our own band here. But that did not happen and will not be happening this go round. But we are just thrilled to have Terence here with us today and tomorrow in concert. So Terence, tell us more about your family and your dad and mom as well.
Well, it's interesting to hear you talk about wanting to bring all of the cousins together. It's a good thing because that means we're working. Nobody's sitting at home. So that means we're getting paid and we can pay our rent. So that's a good thing. For me, it's interesting to hear you talk about that because I grew up in a household filled with music. My father, Oliver, well, actually, it was an interesting thing how things happen. I grew up knowing my father as Oliver Joseph Blanchard, but when he passed away, we saw his birth certificate and it said Joseph Oliver Blanchard. So my name is Terence Oliver, and my mom thought she was doing something by giving me what she thought was my dad's first name. Yes. But we wound up having the same middle name, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's how things go. But my father loved the opera, and he studied with a guy named Osceola Blanchett, C-H-E-T, who was the musical director at my church, and who for the longest time I thought was my grandfather. Khalees died before I was born. I never got a chance to meet him. I only heard stories about him. And the wild part about it for me was that music was just surrounding the household. My grandfather on my mother's side, John Ray, he played guitar. My mom's sister, my aunt, Joyce, played piano, taught voice and piano. And her first husband, his name was Frederick Hamilton, sang with my dad. Um, and the thing that I was telling Lauren this earlier, having come full circle, being in the opera world was not just a blessing, but it was an honor for me because these black men that I grew up with loved opera in a way that opera didn't love them back. They would rehearse every Wednesday night at Mr. Blanchard's house. And it was a type of atmosphere that, I look back on and I feel very blessed to be a part of, because when my dad would bring me to those rehearsals, I was studying piano at the time, and Mr. Blanchard, before they would start rehearsal, he would say, "Play your piece for me. What are you working on? Play it for me now." And I would have to sit down and play for them, and he would critique me before they would even start rehearsal, and I was always in that type of environment, where music was the thing. And it was such a beautiful experience now that I reflect back on it, because I didn't see it any other place than in the community, in the homes that I was in. I didn't hear it on the radio. I didn't see it on television. So to me, these were the weirdest black people I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? But I look back on it now, and it's so fascinating. And I have to explain it in this way. I tried to sing. They put me in a church choir one Sunday.
And what happened?
They heard me sing. And I'll never forget it, man. I forgot who it was. I forgot which woman it was. They said, "Doesn't that boy play the horn?" Go on, get your horn, baby, and come on back. You can praise the Lord back here by the organ. That's what happened with me. One Sunday, bro, that was it. I thought I was on my way to being Pavarotti or something, man. That didn't happen. But anyway, so I stayed away from that music because once I started playing an instrument, I got into Miles Davis, Clifford Brown, Thelonious Monk, and all of that stuff. And I viewed that music as not being me, right? Well, here's the wild part. I've become a composer, and I started writing for film. And everybody in my career talked about my melodic sensibility. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe that was something I was just born with. No. I realized as an adult that came about because of all of the melodic music I heard, church music, operatic music growing up as a kid. And all of that stuff still lingers in the back of my brain in terms of how I connect to music emotionally, right? And when I did my first opera, Champion in St. Louis, one of the guys who was the major, played one of the major roles, Arthur Woodley, he's passed on now, but he was a great baritone. He knew my story about my dad and myself. And on the night of the premiere, man, he grabbed me, and when I went on stage for my curtain call, and he said, "Your dad would be really proud." And that was like a powerful thing for me because, I could, he knows. I could hear my dad right now, right at that moment, I heard my dad. "See, I told you, boy. You're going off and try to play all them notes. You just need to come on back here and deal with some melody and let people know what you're doing." And I could hear him talking about this because my father was the type of person, if anything was happening artistically at any given moment and I was around, he stopped. Hey, come here. Look, there's Oscar Peterson on TV. Come here, sit down. Listen to that. Listen at that. Listen to how he touched the piano. Listen to the chords that he plays. Listen to what he's doing. See, that's music. All that screaming and yelling y'all guys do, I don't know what that is, but this is music. He would get me all of the time. When I was a young kid, taking piano lessons, my father sold insurance, and he sold insurance to lower income black people in New Orleans. He wanted to make sure that they could be buried with dignity. But in doing so, that meant that those premiums were like really inexpensive. So he always had a bunch of change in his pocket. So as soon as he would hit the door, you would hear that, because my dad always ruffled his fingers through the change. And you would hear that as soon as he would hit the door. And I would be in the back, because we lived in a small house. I'd be in the back and I'd go, oh, Lord, here he comes. Because I'm in the back, I'm a kid. I'm back there watching cartoons after school. And he would come back and say, hey, boy, don't you have a recital in 2 months? I'm like, yeah, in 2 months. And he would say, like, no, you need to come up here and practice. Come up here and practice. And he would make me practice. And, I hated it at the time, but I also watched my father in the way that he worked and his work ethic. And I know this is a trait of having this last name, because he's the same way. We're workaholics, and that was one of the things that kind of stuck with me, when I became a professional musician. My father would stay up all night balancing the books, for his company. And he was an orderly at a hospital. He had worked 2 jobs, to make sure that we could make ends meet and make sure that I would have, lessons and all of those other things. So when I think about my family, I think about a family that was dedicated to the idea of raising family. I didn't, even though my father drank, even though my father knew how to have a good time, the most important thing to him was the family, and when you're young, you don't really get it. Like my father had to always be at all of my performances, which I thought was a drag. Why you got to come? Just let me be out there by myself. And I didn't realize that the other kids were hoping that their parents would be there. And my father was there all the time. Yeah. We used to make a joke about, if my father was around when we did the opera, we'd have to chain his ass to a chair. Because, he'd be like, hey, that's not the way you sing that. Hey, But that's the thing that I loved about my family, and I still do love about my family. I'm very proud of this guy. I've watched him growing up. Once we became connected, I watched everything that he's been involved in terms of education and his dedication to that. It's very similar to what I've been doing with my career in music. There's no difference between the work ethic, It's just that mine is more public than his, But it's a beautiful thing to feel connected to something, because I didn't necessarily have that. We were joking earlier because my father was older when he had me, so a lot of my first cousins are a lot older than me, right? And one of them who passed away, his name was Gerald. I never forget when I finally met Gerald here in Texas. Gerald said, yeah, we knew we had a little young cousin down in New Orleans, but you was too young to hang with us. And from what I heard, that was a good thing.
That was a good thing. He's telling the truth there. Let me just, I know that you have many other questions, but the Blanchards are never short on words. I'll just say that.
Hey, man. Don't ask a question if you won't know the answer. Yeah.
I'll say as well that whole family piece, it almost made me, feel emotional. It doesn't take much to get me emotional, but, that very much like what you described, your dad and your mom, and I saw that, the dedication to you and the cultivation of you, and the sacrifices made, right? Same for my mom and dad. And they just went all out to make sure, as my father would say all the time, your life will be better than ours. Right. And I'm going to make sure of that, because I'm going to give you everything I've got to make sure that happens.
And the other thing that I think is really important too, and I didn't understand this until I became a parent myself, our family, and probably like a lot of other families in this room, made a big distinction about what we saw in the street and what we did in the house. There was a big difference between the two. Yes. So while I would be concerned with what we would consider back then a social kind of idea or attitude, because of what you would see on television or radio, whatever, that didn't matter to my parents or nobody in the family. They're like, okay, you leave that out here. What we do as a family, we do this, and we respect ourselves and we act accordingly. We do certain things a certain way. And that, to me, is something that we're trying to pass down generation to generation, because I think that's important, not to be so easily influenced by outside forces.
Exactly. You better hop in.
I'm about to jump in. But Terrence,
you
let me
gotta
ask you.
wait for us to take a breath.
Yeah. You know, I got to find that right spot to jump in. But Terrence, let me ask you this question. Can you tell us how your career in music really took off? And was there a defining moment or breakthrough?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple. It goes back to this thing that we were just talking about. A lot of us always heard you got to be twice as good. You know, that's no secret, right? The thing about it is to actually make me go through the process, to practice, to be serious. You know, my dad would always tell me, he'd say, if you're not gonna practice, I'm gonna take the instrument away, right? And that scared me, you know what I mean? So I would always be on my game. So I'm saying that to say that when I got to New York, I was surprised at my level of success. Because to me, I'm still trying to get better because of the level that my father saw me attaining. You know what I mean? So when I first started playing with Art Blakey, you know, because Wynton was in the band and Wynton left the band, he said, man, I want you to audition. And when I got the job, it was incredible to me. Now, here's the funny part. My dad didn't know who Art Blakey was, right? And I was the first in my immediate family to go to college. You know, like now most of the Blanchards in our family, they're well-educated people, but my dad didn't go to college, right? So when I got a scholarship to Rutgers University, an Ivy League school, that was a huge deal. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, I'm leaving Rutgers to go play with somebody my daddy didn't know. Man, it hit the fan, really, you know. And I'll never forget, he said, "You're not my son." We had a big riff behind it. But my dad's, and this is the thing that I've always appreciated about my dad. He could admit when he made a mistake to me, right? So I come back and I'd made my first album with Art Blakey, and it was called "Oh, By the Way," which was a song that I had written. And I got the title of the album. I was 19 years old. And I gave it to my dad, and my dad, he just kind of poo-pooed it. He's like, you need to go back to school, that kind of thing. Well, he was always friends with some jazz musicians in New Orleans. And he called me up. And he said, there was a trombone player named Clem Turvalon in New Orleans. And I'll never forget it. My dad said, Clem told me this Art Blakey is somebody. You know what I mean? And that was a big thing for him. You know what I mean? And that was a big thing for me. But and I don't know I hope I explained this right. That was a big thing for me because that meant that we were trying to find something true and real. We weren't arguing over position, who's right or who's wrong. It wasn't that. You know what I mean? Because my dad called me up another time and he said, I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry. I get emotional when I think about it. He said, I'm proud of you because if you listen to me, you may have stayed in New Orleans and not have fulfilled your dreams. And he said, I'm happy that you were strong-willed enough to go ahead and do your thing. And that meant a great deal because he didn't understand what it was that I was looking for because he wanted me to be a classical musician. And I started out doing that. And when I started playing jazz in my church and in my immediate community, I was shunned for playing jazz. But when he started to really get it, he apologized. That was huge.
Well, I would say your gift to the world has been amazing. And
listen, I appreciate that, you know, but the thing you have to understand is that I grew up in a community where I saw so many talented Black men not receive the opportunity to do what it is that they love and have more than enough talent to be in the world with any and compete with anybody, right? So that's the thing that sticks with me in the back of my head. So whenever I'm doing a project or whenever I'm doing a film or anything, I'm trying to live up to their legacy. And these are Black men that people don't know. They don't know them. But those men were at that house every Wednesday night because they love music. You know?
But I mean, I know that you've given a lot of opportunities to people like Kendra Scott and people like that. So you're still, giving opportunities to the next generation as well.
Well, because I come along in a period where that's what you did. If anybody in New Orleans who saw any of us who had interest in music, they put us under their wing. Kid Jordan, Ellis Marcellus, Clyde Kerr, Emery Thompson, or Wallace Davenport. These are a lot of musicians that you probably never have heard of, but these are guys that were real prominent in New Orleans. And if you showed any interest, anytime they saw you, hey man, what you working on? Yeah, oh, okay, cool. Did you ever check this out? So there was this notion of always constantly striving to be the best, to be excellent. We weren't trying to get by. That wasn't a thing. And the other part of it too, we never talked about stardom or money. That was never part of the equation.
That's right.
It was always a love or a passion for what it is that you do. Because to be honest, we never thought that we'd, listen, me and Wynton talked about it. When Wynton started playing with Art Blakey and started making records, and then I joined the band after him, we thought that we were just going to be playing clubs, because I was supposed to go to school on the West Coast. So we thought we were just going to be playing clubs in the East Coast and West Coast, and that was it. So when he got signed to Columbia Records, we were like, damn, that's huge, And even when he got signed, I didn't expect that for me, right? So then when it happened to me, it was a shock because stardom was not the goal. Excellence was the goal.
Well, let me ask you this question. You've worked with some legendary figures in both the music industry and in Hollywood. Could you share some memorable experiences working alongside these industry giants and how those collaborations shaped your career?
I can't share all of them.
We can go deep.
I remember one of the first times I met Dizzy Gillespie playing with Art Blakey. We were in Italy, and he was a guest star with our band, with Art Blakey's band. And we were playing in this square in a small town in Italy. And we were using a church as our dressing room. And in between sets, we were in the church. They couldn't find Dizzy. They said, "Where's Dizzy?" Found him praying at one of the altars in the church, right? In the middle of the show, between shows. Then Art Blakey goes, "Well, he plays piano, Diz." And Diz goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, look, when we go back out, just me and you gonna go out." And I'm like, okay. I don't know why we're gonna do that. And then he said, "Well, we're gonna play 2 ballads. I'm gonna play piano for you on a ballad, and you play piano for me on a ballad." I'm like 20 years old, and I always make a joke. I said, "That's the first time you ever heard vibrato on a piano." Because my hands were shaking so much. And then another time, playing with Sonny Rollins at Carnegie Hall was pretty amazing. I've had great experiences with that type of thing. And then the first time I stood in front of an orchestra to wave my hands to have them play something that I'd written for one of Spike's movies, my father had come, he was still living, and he had got a chance to come to the session. And that was a big moment for me because, it kind of legitimized me in my father's mind that I'm writing orchestral music, And then it's just been so many along the way, meeting Quincy Jones, getting a chance to hang out with Herbie Hancock, Wayne Short, and all of those guys. You know, it's like I've been living like a fairy tale music life in a sense. You know, and it's not lost on me at all. You know, we constantly talk about how blessed we've been in all of the experiences that we've had because, you know, my life could have easily gone another direction. You know, I always make a joke about it too, but it's real. I grew up in a middle class neighborhood, but a lot of the people that moved in the neighborhood moved from poor neighborhoods and brought their badass kids with them. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of stuff going on in the neighborhood that wasn't supposed to be going on, and I was right in close proximity with, you know, like a lot of other folks, but you wouldn't think about it because it was a middle class neighborhood. But I was right in close proximity with a lot of stuff that could have made my life go in a totally different direction. You know what I mean? So it's truly by the grace of God that I'm here doing all of this, which is again something that's not lost on me because I've had friends that have lost their lives. I've had friends that's been arrested. I've had, you know, the gambit, all of that stuff. And they're close friends, right? And you sit there and say to yourself, why me? You know, and if I'm here, then there has to be a bigger purpose to this. See, the thing that I want people to really understand about my career is not about me. It is not about me at all. You know, my career is about serving a bigger mission. You know, that's something that we've been instilled with from our family. That's been a part of our legacy. I mean, you know, like I'm the musician, but these dudes are all educators. He's not the only one, and they've been doing great work for decades.
So this, I'm sorry.
I want to just pick up on that because I mean you've used some terms that just resonate not only with me but those within the University of Houston downtown community about excellence and opportunity and reaching a high bar. You know, all of those were just deeply rooted in our families, and that. You know, while it was happening in New Orleans, it was also happening in Lake Charles. And that more importantly, your last statement that my mother and father would always say to me is that it's never about you. That your focus has always got to be on uplifting others. And, you know, that's what really struck me as I'm listening to this. You know, a lot of the work that we do in higher education is really about trying to reach that next level of excellence. That we've got lots of opportunity to build upon that, because when you're reaching that next level of excellence, it's also then providing the kinds of opportunities that our students need and deserve in order to make sure that they are 100% ready for what lies ahead. And for what lies ahead for us is that we want to see these students not only go on into graduate or professional school and into the workforce, but that we really are working diligently to ensure that they become leaders in their professions and leaders in their communities. Because then they take that baton and they uplift others. And so it becomes generational thereafter. So, you know, all of that I never put all that together until now in terms of, you know, the what we strive for in higher education is not far removed from perhaps what you strive for as well in music, right? And the universality of what we do and the level of excellence that we try to reach.
If people who encounter us don't become better, we failed. You know, it's all about.
I love that. Can you say that one more time?
If people who encounter us don't become better, we failed.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where, you know, it's like I said, it's not about me or any individual. It's a broader thing, because that's what I saw growing up. That's what I saw with my dad. You know, when my dad was selling insurance to people, he wasn't making any money with this, but he saw in the Black community that people were not able to bury their loved ones, right? So he had these little cheap insurance policies that he would go out. And when I was a kid, he would take me on the route because, you know, some Black families don't believe in summer school. So he would take me on the route with him sometimes. And I would watch him, like, you know, collect this money and tell these people how important it is to have these policies, just so in case somebody passed away, you could bury them with dignity. You know what I mean? So that wasn't about him. It was about serving the community.
So this next question is for both. There's a clear affinity for the genre of opera that runs in your family. Tell us about that.
I'll start by saying that, growing up, we didn't really listen to opera in Lake Charles. I don't know if it wasn't a thing in Lake Charles, Louisiana, as it may have been in New Orleans. But the interesting part about it is that when I was first went to an opera, it was in New Orleans, as a matter of fact. And I remember also well, I was seated next to someone and they told me that I needed to wear a tuxedo. And I was like, why do I need to wear a tuxedo to go to an opera? And that was a big thing, because then I had to go rent the tuxedo and try to make sure that it would fit right and all this other stuff. But anyway, so I get there and I'm seated next to these two individuals. And I noticed at one point that the woman sitting right next to me, that her eyes were closed throughout the entire opera. And I was like, well, I asked her during intermission, was she okay? And I said, because I noticed your eyes closed. And I said, for me, I have to have my eyes open because they're singing in a different language. I don't know what the hell they're saying, right? So I'm reading the words, carefully so that and she says that I'm reading my soul and I allow my soul to interpret what it is that's being said, and that music really carries me to a different place, and opera music in particular does just that for me without the words. And I was like, well, damn. Let me close my eyes. But it just speaks to the fact of and since then I've been going to the opera. My eyes have been open, but because I love the music, right, and what it means. But I like all genres of music, and help me with this, Terrence, because it's just this whole thing about, I used that term earlier about the universality of music, and not to generalize it, because people will have the different genres that they like, but music of any kind to me speaks to me in some way.
Of course. I mean, because music has that ability to go past what words can do. That's always been the thing. For me, I heard opera in the house all the time, whether I wanted to or not. I mean, I always tell a joke. My dad would put on his records, man, and you hear doors slamming in the house because people would be in the back like, oh, damn, there he goes. But I think one of the reasons why I got emotional earlier is because sometimes we take our parents for granted. You know what I mean? We don't understand the level of intellect that they're operating with, and I'll give you an example. So my cousin, who I grew up in the house with, he got a drum set. And when he started playing the drums, he started playing like a James Brown beat on the drums. And my dad came in there. I must have been about like 10 or 11, right? My dad comes in there and said, boy, that's not the way you play the drums. Let me show you how to play the drums. And he sits down on the drums and he starts doing 4/4 on the bass drum, 2/4 on a hi-hat like this, right? Man, we thought that was some of the corniest stuff. We laughed. And my dad got mad, you know what I mean? He said, y'all don't want to learn nothing, and got up off the drums and stormed out of the room, right? Well, I'm 19 years old, playing with my hero. I had just gotten a gig. We're in Strasbourg, France. I'll never forget it. He called this tune moaning, right? And when it gets to the middle of the tune, I couldn't damn near play. I was like, wow, this is coming from the guy that I thought was the most outrageous renegade in jazz. And he's playing what my dad showed me when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And I never forget it, man. He met my dad. They hung out. And then in a true Art Blakey way, man, a few weeks later, we're someplace on a gig, and I'm hanging out with him in the dressing room, and he goes, you think your daddy corny, don't you? And he said, you don't know how hip your daddy really is. So then that started to make me really understand the breadth of his musical scope, to go from that to listening to Carmen, Rigoletto, Puccini, Verdi, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I get emotional about it because I feel blessed to have been born to those parents. You know what I mean? Because I run into so many kids when I've been teaching where the parents don't have that support. I'm thinking of a kid right now, years ago, man, I was teaching I was doing a residency at the school in Atlanta. Clark, not the other one. Clark. No, Morehouse. I'm sorry. Morehouse, yes. It was Morehouse. And there was a young guy there that played trumpet, man. The dude was really talented. And I was excited to meet him. And I was like, oh, okay, man. Well, look, man, when you want to do this? And he said, well, I'm not going to pursue a career in music because my parents told me if I did, they wouldn't pay for my schooling. And that, to me, it hit me like a ton of bricks because I'm like, how can a parent not recognize this dude's talent? Not recognize what he has naturally and what he could be, how he could be a gift to the world, right? So that's when I look at my parents and I feel like very, very blessed to have gone that route with them and just my family in general, because our family, has, I don't know how to explain it, but our family has always been like the quiet, supportive group of people, the most supportive people I've ever seen. You know what I mean? You don't get a chance to experience them all the time, but dude, when they're there, they're the proudest people, you know what I mean? And they're there to support. They're not there to criticize. They're not there to look at you and go, oh, look at none of that. That's never happened in my family from any member of my family, And that's why I'm so proud of even him, to see the things that he's been doing. Because I know the journey he's been on in this education thing. It's not anything like frivolous. This is something that he's been serious about for his entire life, since we were young, since you were working at Xavier, in New Orleans. And I look at it and I go, thank you to whoever you want to believe, that I've been surrounded by this energy and that I have this DNA in my system, because it's allowed me to do all of the stuff that I've been able to do, and I'm just thankful and grateful.
And I say, thank you. We were talking above to our dads who are up there, right?
Oh, no.
And constantly with us, and our moms who are still with us.
Yeah.
Actually, we were talking as we were walking over here that on our on the Blanchard side of the family, our moms are the two oldest and still alive in the family. His mom is 94, and my mom is 90.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty amazing.
And when you talk about truth tellers, oh my God.
Oh my. That's why she's not here today.
Right, yeah, buddy. I was about to say, if you don't want to know about it, don't ask. I'll never forget, man. I was one of the first times I was a presenter on the Soul Train Awards. Man, I went and got a nice suit, got me a black earring. I thought I was looking hip, I told my mom to watch the show. And I called up after. I said, Mom, did you see the show? She goes, yeah, you're fat. Yeah, my mom.
High praise.
They keep it real, man. You never get a chance to have an ego in my family because I tell people all the time, man, I've been playing in front of presidents and I come back home and my mom goes, listen, when you leave, put my garbage out on the front. And put my top of my can on tight, because last time you did it, the dogs got in and I had to go out there and clean it up.
That's called humility.
Yeah.
Humility. I live it every day.
Right.
So let me ask another question. What inspires you when you're creating these compositions and songs, and what do you tap into?
It's hard
Wait, so I want to piggyback on that because that's what's been in my head. So you don't know this, but I've only done 1 trillion interviews, and we have a wonderful opportunity to really talk about higher education, talk about all that UHD is doing, and then when they start talking about the upcoming concert and talking about one of the statements that I've continued to make is that you're like a cat with 9 lives, and that so far you have lived 3 of those lives. The jazz piece, the musical scores for movies, and the opera. And so it leaves you hungering for what's more. But how do you do that? How do you be so creative in those 3 areas that, yes, it's all music, but really very different kinds of music that you create?
Well, it's I guess the best way that I can explain it is that growing up hearing the music that I heard, especially in the church, my mom was Baptist, my dad was Congregationalist. So I went to church with my dad, but then I would go to church with my mom every so often. And in both churches, when I heard that music, there's a certain power and yearning and expression of people that seemingly are not being heard. That really has had an effect on me. And whenever I get an opportunity, I look at it as a means for me to speak for all of them. You know what I mean? When I started working with Spike, it was the same thing. I'll never forget when we did Miracle at St. Anna. You look at all of those soldiers who had given their life for this country, and not to come back to a hero's welcome, to me is a travesty. And being able to work on a project like that, I simply say, I want to say thank you to them. And doing the operatic stuff, it's a similar thing where, I was telling Lauren earlier, when my opera went to the Met, the first day of rehearsal, we had to sit down with the entire cast and we had a discussion about the importance of what was about to happen at the Met. Because at the time, I didn't know that I was the first African-American composer to have a production at the Met,
Ever.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah, thank you. But we were talking about the importance of it, and a lot of things came up. But one of the things that struck me was how most of those singers either grew up singing in a church or singing R&B or singing jazz. And they had been in that world for decades and was told to turn all of that off to sing Puccini, sing Verdi, right? And to a certain degree, I'll give them a shot, and I say, okay, I understand it because that music didn't exist when this music was created. Okay. But what we're doing is about our culture and our community. And I told them, I said, I want y'all to bring all of that back to this world. And I'll never forget it. Angel Blue in rehearsal, she said, so do you mind if I take some liberties? Because she grew up singing in the church and had a beautiful operatic voice, but really could sing gospel, right? I said, are you kidding? I'm a jazz musician. Go ahead and do your thing. And there's an aria called Peculiar Grace. I once was a boy of Peculiar Grace. And when she started singing it, everybody was in tears. And I think everybody was in tears, not because it was something that I had written, but it was the realization of our culture at its highest level, right? And I'll never forget the assistant dramaturg who was African American. Man, he was so overwhelmed. He started crying uncontrollably, and he walked out the room and he said, I don't think they're ready for this, because that's not what you had heard at the Met for years, right? And then we also had a step sequence, right? Because it was about Charles Blow's life going to college. That step sequence got a standing ovation every night. You know what I mean? And I think it got an ovation because we were seeing our culture on this stage where we had been prohibited from being on for the longest time. And even when we got on that stage, we didn't necessarily see our full culture on that stage, right? And as a matter of fact, and I was telling Lauren this, when we did Champion, there's a mezzo-soprano, her name is Stephanie Blythe, who's been in the business for years and is an extreme pro, beautiful voice. She came up to me in tears in the rehearsal and she said, I wish Jesse Norman was here to see what she birthed. You know what I mean? So the level of pride that people have had with all of this, it's just been, it's like we've been chipping away at this thing that has precluded us from being totally who we are, right? And LaTanya Moore, who's from Texas, when she told me that throughout her entire career, this was one of the first roles that she really could relate to. She wanted her mom to see this because she wanted her mom to see that character on the stage. Dude, that invigorates me to make sure that I'm not dropping the ball. You know what I mean? My thing is because here's the thing, the little secret you need to know. When I hand this music over to them, dude, they own it. They take it to a place I couldn't imagine. You know what I mean? And it's not mine anymore, right? They do something with it that's just like magical. So for me, when I see that, I get excited about, well, let me give them the best, strongest base from them to start from so that they could take it to this other place, right? And that's the whole notion about what community is. Collaboration, right? I've never gone into any of my rehearsals and said, sing it this way. Never, ever. You know what I mean? Because for me, that's ego. That's ego saying, oh, I want it to be done this way. Well, while you want it to be done this way, there may be a better way sitting right there that you're not aware of because your ego is trying to be in control. Allow people to bring their talents to what it is that we all do, you know? And when you talk about where do I find, that's what I get excited about. I get excited about like, okay, you'll never hear this at all, ever, because there's never going to be a recording. But when I'm sitting at home singing it by myself with that horrible church voice that got me kicked out of the choir, you know what I mean? I'm sitting there thinking about what's going to happen with these beautiful voices that come in and take it to the next place.
Can we get an A selection from you?
I was like, who are you talking to?
Yeah, no, dude, you'll never hear me sing ever. I mean, there's not enough alcohol in Texas to make that happen. Yeah.
So, Dr. Blanchard, what's your favorite Terence Blanchard composition?
You know, and this is going to sound really basic, but the reality is that, and I know that this will resonate with most of you because anytime I have been on this interview trek for the concert, people have randomly come to me and said, let me tell you what my favorite song is. And I say to them, it's mine as well. And it's Mo Better Blues. It's, you know, because, you know, it sticks in my head, first of all, and in the da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Da 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 dum
Yeah,
dum dum
yeah.
dum. That sounds much better, trust me. But the reality is that you know, it also was reminiscent for me because, you know, every time when I worked at Xavier, one of the things that we did is that for faculty members who had passed away, we would do a special tribute to them, and we would scroll not only their faces, but we would scroll them where they would be in the classroom with students. I don't ever told you this, but this was the background music that was played, and it was just so appropriate because it instilled that kind of nostalgic feeling that goes along with what you see visually, that you feel it as well. So, and of course that has nothing to do with the movie, I know, but the reality is that that song just continues to be my favorite song.
I appreciate you saying that. You know, for me, man, one of the ones that resonates with me all the time, because I really feel like I didn't write it, was the stuff for Hurricane Katrina. You know, that I felt like that was I was having an out of body experience doing that music. It was something you couldn't imagine. I was so angry at the time. I was so angry that our country could let us down like that. You know, I was so angry that people would come by and kiss your ass for your vote, but wouldn't be able to maintain those levees. You know what I mean? I was angry that every movie that I saw in my life, the railroad tracks were on the street level. But in my neighborhood, they were built up really high on these levees, and I didn't understand it until I saw the water and how it had risen to a point where I could only see rooftops in those tracks, right? And it just meant to me that commerce was more important than our lives. It was more important to make sure that commerce could continue than us to maintain our lives. So, and then the whole notion of people who look like me being called refugees was something that sticks with me to this day, because I'm like, why that word? Why that word out of any other time in our history when you have tornadoes, natural disasters? Why are we being called refugees, right? And I just felt like, you know, we were working on Spike's movie called Inside Man at the time. And I'll never forget it. I had an apartment in LA because I was teaching at UCLA at the time. And it's kind of funny now. It wasn't funny then. I couldn't find my mom for 2 weeks, right? I was trying to call her. You know, I knew they were in Mississippi someplace, but I didn't know what. So when my mom finally answered the phone and said, "Mom, I've been trying to call you for 2 weeks." She goes, "I heard that thing buzzing in my purse, but..."
Welcome to our world.
I know. That's why you have to remember your religion at that moment in time. This is my mom. But you know, Spike came to the. Normally he would fly me to New York to work on the film, to to spot it, where we would go through and scene by scene and figure out where music needs to go. He said, "You stay with your family. I'm going to come to you," right? He said, "You don't need to be away from your family right now," which I really appreciated, because that's the way exactly how I felt, because my girls were little at the time. And I'll never forget it, man. He walked in my my apartment. He didn't even say hello. He walked in, he says, "I'm gonna do a documentary on those levees, and I want to give those people a chance to speak." And my level of respect for him went through the roof at that moment in time. And I knew that he was gonna do an amazing job, because one of the little known secrets about Spike is that I feel like he's a better documentarian than a filmmaker. His documentaries are like amazing. You don't hear him speak. He allows the subjects to speak and tell their stories. And it's amazing how he can cut it all together to create a narrative. So I knew it was going to be amazing. And I knew that I could not be the weak link in that chain. So for me, that music, even when I play it to this day, I get emotional thinking about dead bodies in the neighborhoods that I grew up in. You know, you see it on television. It's like, that's the most ludicrous thing to ever experience, to think that that could actually happen in America. And then I tour, with me being a musician that tours, I go to Amsterdam and they're telling me, how could that happen? Because we wanted to help you guys develop your levee system, because they have an incredible levee system. You know what I mean? And then you start to think to yourself, wow, this is just amazing that this happened. So for me, that music will always hold a special place in my heart, just because to me, it's about the resilience and the strength of a community, because after that, man, every time I did an interview, people kept saying, "Man, you're gonna go back to New Orleans? You're gonna go back to New Orleans?" I got so tired of hearing, and I was living in LA at the time. I got so tired of hearing that. I said, "Yeah, I'm going back, because I can't stand your music and I hate your food." Which was true. I got tired of eating Italian food. I'm like, damn, can I get something else? And listen, when I went back, I just to make it, you'll get this. So I go back, and then being in LA, I got on a health kick, eating healthy, right? So I ordered a spinach salad at this restaurant, Bryson's, uptown. And I wasn't paying attention, man. They bring the salad back and it had fried oyster on top. Man, and I cut into that oyster, and a tear just ran down my... I said, "Oh man, I'm home.
I'm home."
So Terrence, you said music and art have the power to change hearts and souls. It seems to me that the interaction of higher education and music is the ability to change lives for the better. Let's discuss how each of you in your particular field look upon the impact you have on individuals and on communities.
Okay, let me just start off by saying it's so important. The problem with it is that you can't take a cookie cutter approach to it. You know what I mean? And I'll give you an example. When I started going to the arts high school, bro, it was the first time I wanted to go to school every day. I'll never forget it. I literally, it was like a flip flop. I remember before that being sick, just got to get like a little bit of a cough. Oh, I can't go to school. And, that didn't work, but I tried. And then I remember later on having 103 temperature, right? Full of phlegm, having the flu, trying to get up. And my mom is telling me, boy, you better get your behind back in bed. I'm like, no, I got to go to school because I knew we were going to be learning something, right? Because all of that stuff is stuff that I could use. And that's the trick to this stuff with education. If kids can see a way that it matters to their lives, then it becomes a different thing. So for me, when I'm teaching, I'm always trying to relate it to what it is the kids are living. So especially in music, I was, and after this election, it even matters even more so. But I would always tell my students, I said, listen, your generation is going to really need to understand that you're going to have to create music to help people's souls heal, right? So I'm giving you these tools. I'm not telling you what to write. I'm showing you how to take your ideas and build upon them, right? And we've been having great success with that. I mean, the BMI, there's a BMI. BMI is an organization that they deal with publishing rights and stuff like that. They had a composers competition. They didn't want my students to enter because we kept winning. You know what I mean? And that meant a lot to me. So I have students now that have been working on the Oscars, been working on the Grammys. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, they were doing the Grammys and they did a segment where they played Mo Better Blues as one of the commercial segments as a tribute to me. And a little known fact that I just found out during the Oscars, they wanted to play a tribute to Jay Dilla and myself. So when Chris Rock walked on, they played Jay Dilla. But if there wasn't a slap, when he walked off, they were going to be playing my music. And they didn't get a chance to do it because of that. But the point is that you helped young people get to the point where they had that opportunity. You know what I mean? So my students, I have students that are working with Justin Timberlake, that are working with so many different people doing films, doing a lot of different things. Some of the young people that you see in the jazz world, some of them are students of mine. You know what I mean? That means a lot to me because, like I said, this is not about me. It's about creating a force, right, that can move all of this stuff forward. Because you know what I think about? Lift every voice. How powerful is that? When Black people hear lift every voice, we know exactly what that means, right? As a matter of fact, I remember we were playing in Atlanta. We played it and Art Blakey stopped the band and he told the audience, he said, whenever you hear this song, you need to stand up. He said, I don't ever want to see you sitting down when we play this song. So it's just something that powerful and that meaningful. When I hear John Coltrane play Alabama, man, I weep like a baby, thinking about he wrote this tune for these 4 little girls. You know what I'm saying? So the importance of education is massive. It's huge because we don't have a lack of talent. That is a misnomer. There's talent all over the place. These kids have talent, and I wish people would stop talking about that like the good old days. No. The good old days is your perception, right? These young kids are coming along with brilliant ideas. What they need are the tools to help them to develop. And that's where we come in as educators. We don't come in as educators to do what I do. No, man, that makes no sense. That's boring. You know what I mean? Wayne Shorter, I had a young kid, she wrote a thing that she thought was a tribute to Wayne Shorter, and she had just written exactly what he had played, right? I'm like, no, that's not a tribute to Wayne. Wayne wouldn't think of that as a tribute. Wayne would want to know what is on your mind. How do you perceive this? What do you have to say? It's not about that's what I said. That was my mode of thinking. Tell me what's on your brain. You know what I mean? Because that's how we're all going to grow. And to be honest, some of us, we have to learn how to be open to that, because we have this thing of like, well, these kids don't. No, we got to stop that. We got to stop that, because they're coming along in a different time where they have a different mode of communication. They have different tools to use to help them communicate, right? We just need to show them the fundamentals of how all of this stuff works, right? And then because man, once you do that, I had a kid, man, came in with a composition. I was blown away. I was like, dude, what? He said, well, I did what you told me to. But he wrote something that I would never conceive of, and it was amazing.
So let's look to the future now. Dr. Blanchard, in light of today's conversation, as well as UHD's celebrating 50 years, what are your aspirations for the future?
How much time do you have? No, I'll keep it brief. But I was just thinking as I was listening to Terence talk about all the different elements about a strong base, developing a strong base, and then with that strong base, allowing individuals to go and to thrive. And that strong foundation really helps tremendously. And then I thought about, you just heard me say that he's got 3 lives. I said, maybe the 4th life, you need to be a university president, because
No.
I think you're on your way here.
Blanchard and Blanchard.
There you go. So, for this campus, it's no secret in terms of the areas of focus that we've got around excellence, about expansion, and about partnerships. And we have been really working very diligently to make sure that, for those students with all these rich talents that they have in so many different ways, that they do believe that we're giving them the knowledge and the skills that they need to further cultivate as they leave us with that degree, to be able to really perfect those skills, be it in the performing arts area, or be it in the law area, or criminal justice, or teaching. It doesn't matter. That foundation is going to be rich enough that you've got here, that that it gives you the wings that you need to fly. And so that's what really matters most for this university. With 70% of our students being first generation, about 55% of our students coming from economically deprived backgrounds. And let me just tell you, both of us sit in that seat, right, in terms of the first generation part, right? And certainly I can speak to the fact that my parents didn't have a lot of money. We never knew it because they were making so many sacrifices that we just never knew that we were at the bottom of the barrel financially, right? But the bigger reality for us in terms of the university is making sure that these individuals, when they leave us, that they really are leaving us with degrees of value. And it's really empowering them in ways that they could never even imagine, that without that degree, they would not be able to do the things and accomplish the things that they would have before them. And certainly on the expansion side, we've been talking about expanding our base of degrees, and that I'll tell you that we really are interested in the performing arts in particular, cultivating. I know we've got a fine arts degree with a concentration in music, but we really do want to think about, and I've been planting this seed. It doesn't happen that when I say it absolutely happens, but the seed that I'm planting is that I'd love to see the University of Houston downtown, and this will resonate with you, to establish a world music program. Just think about all of the different great groups of students and the kinds of music that you bring, from mariachi to jazz. I mean, but whatever form of music it is throughout the world. I'm always fascinated when I go to different countries and I see instruments and I was like, what does that do? What is that, right? And then when you hear the sound come out of it, you're like, well, wow, that's pretty amazing. But I want our students exposed to all of that, and given that opportunity to really thrive in those kinds of fields and others. And so also with the expansion side is the fact that we're looking very carefully at, when you look at this area, you see those interstates going in this direction. Those interstates, by the way, are going to be torn down at some point soon. Well, not too soon. I don't want anybody to panic, but the reality is that they're rerouting the interstate. But it's going to give us an opportunity for us to have a more cohesive college campus, which we're really looking forward to. We're not looking forward to all the hardship it's going to create to get to that point, but at the final version of that matters, and that moving in that direction, which is going toward the warehouse district, that we will increase our footprint going in that direction and also deeper into the downtown area. I'll say that, you know, one piece that you all charged me with as president when you created when we created the master plan for the university, not the master plan, the strategic plan for the university, the 7 pillars. One was we must increase our visibility so that folks know who we are in our own right as the University of Houston downtown, and not to be camouflaged, if you will, by one of the other UH universities. And I've taken that very seriously, and we've taken that very seriously. And there's nothing more heartwarming than I'll give you an example on yesterday of putting groceries in my car. And this gentleman comes and he says, "Aren't you the president of University of Houston downtown?" "Yes." And he says, "And you're putting groceries in your car?" "Yes, I do shop for groceries." I don't have anybody to do that for me, so, you know, I'm it. And so he says, "I saw you on television, whatever day." And he says, "You know, I am so happy to be a UHD alum." He said, "My head is held so high." And he said, because, you know, he said he has never heard more about the plans for the University of Houston downtown than he's ever heard within the past 2 to 3 years. And that it makes him proud, and that he then took out his checkbook, this is a true story, and wrote a check for $250 and gave it to me and said, "This is for the university. Keep up the good work." So we need that to happen again and again, but you know, it just speaks to, you know, the work that we're really trying to get done here. You know, that, you know, this is an amazing university. Do we have warts? Do we have a way to go? Yes, we do. But we are thriving, we're building, and that more importantly, we're producing these graduates who really are going out there and making worlds of difference. And for me, that's what it's all about.
Well, you know what, Dr. Blanchard, I want to say, you know, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the impact that UHD is making in the city of Houston. Can you give Dr. Blanchard a round of applause?
It's about us. Give us a hand.
Yeah. Okay. Also, Terence, one last question for you. Can you give us an insider's glimpse into what's next for you? What's your next big project?
Only
30 seconds.
We will be the only ones to know.
30 seconds.
I'm actually working on my 3rd opera right now, and I've enlisted the talents of Walter Isaacson. He's going to be a part of it. And then we're going to bring Casey Lemons back to write the libretto, and I'm excited about that. I'm also getting ready to do a project with the orchestra in Holland. I'm blanking on their name right now, but it's a great orchestra. What'd you say? Somebody said it? No, not them. Metropole Orchestra. There we go.
Thank
I'm about to do something with Metro. Oh, look, there's one of my students right there. He's standing right there. Yeah. So I'm going to do something with them. And then the other thing is, I just became the artistic director of SF Jazz in San Francisco. So, you know, thank you. We put on about close to 400 concerts a year, and we have an amazing hall where we have an totally immersive kind of video system. So we've been doing a lot of really creative things and trying to bring different types of jazz experiences and concerts to people. And you can stream them online. You can go online and see them. And then I'm also trying to, what you were talking about, in terms of broadening the reach, you know, we also want to do, so we can probably talk to you about this, we also want to do SF Jazz Presents, you know, in other venues around the world. So there's a lot of things that's on the plate for me right now, you know, and then there's another film project that I'm getting ready to work on with Gina Prince Bythewood, the woman who did The Woman King. Wow. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Blanchard, I want to give you last words.
There's a concert tomorrow night. featuring Terence Blanchard. I'm so excited to have him here. And, you know, the reality is that his music definitely, if you've never heard it before, this will be a great opportunity for you. There's that word, opportunity. Great opportunity for you. And that, you know, just not only does he have his E-Collection band that's with him, but it's going to be blended with the Student Symphony at the University of Houston. I just love that. And they are so excited.
Oh, and a great guest artist in Ravi Coltrane. Yeah.
Wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Happy to hear it. So tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., we still have tickets available. Just see the Ticketmaster over there, Dr. Liza Alonso. But we just, it's a great tribute for the University of Houston downtown. We have loads of people that are coming to support us, and we're just really, really excited. And that more importantly, it just feels good to be able to do this, starting with my cousin Terence, whom I just absolutely adore, and that more importantly, just the kinds of impacts that his music has made just everywhere, that I just feel that we're just so fortunate to be able to have him with you. So thank you so much,
Oh,
Terence.
man, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, I think that's it. Thank y'all so much for coming out. Really appreciate it. And I'm Ernest Walker again from KTSU 90.9, your community station.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Hold on, folks, really quick. And I don't know if these mics are working because my music wasn't playing earlier. What's going on with it? So anyway, Mr. Walker, thank you again so much for facilitating today. Dr. Blanchard, thank you for sharing your family stories with us. That's wonderful. And again, Mr. Blanchard, thank you so much. We cannot thank you enough. So as we conclude today's session of the President's Lecture Series, we extend our deepest gratitude to Terence Blanchard for sharing his remarkable insights and talents with us. His journey and contributions to the world of music and culture not only inspire, but remind us the power of creativity and resilience. We also thank all of you, students, faculty, alumni, and guests that are here with us today for joining us in fostering a community where the arts and education intersect to ignite new ideas and perspectives. May today's conversation inspire you for your own paths, encourage you to pursue your passions with the same direction, dedication, and brilliance. And I just want to say two things. We've talked a lot about music today, but art has also traveled through all the promotion and everything we've done. I'd want to do a little shout out to Gabe Morales, who has done some of this artwork that has graced our billboards and our promotion. So thank you so much, Gabe. And I was also told that there's a giveaway today. So when you check out, you walk out, I think there's a table, and I think that you can register for that giveaway today. So again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at future President Lecture Series events and that enrich our academic and cultural lives. So again, thank you so much for coming. This concludes our lecture today. Thank you.